Shut up and sit down.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You still have distrust there.
We all come from very different places.
Man, we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
We deserve better.
People have to have the information in front of them.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
There you go. Like, just promote people who are doing something. Volunteer to work with people who you like. And
take an issue that's important to you and do something.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only
Fight for Liberty. This is the cherry on top.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fight for Liberty show. Today, we have an awesome guest returning. You guys probably remember me talking all about his governor campaign before almost every episode last year. So we're excited to have him back on. It's the great Harrison Kemp. But first, before we get into that, we're going to look a little bit at our sponsors and find out how to enjoy a nice night in while also sipping on the blood of your enemies and taking down the tyrannical state. Blood of Tyrants Wine. We talk about them every week. They're probably my favorite sponsor we've ever had because everybody likes wine. Everybody can drink wine. Even if you're not like super into this whole liberty thing, it's still a fun conversation piece and a great thing to have on your shelf. So going over to bloodoftyrants.wine, use promo code F4L and you'll get a little bit of a discount there. And just go ahead and buy somewhere between 13 and 18 bottles right now, today, because that's a good number. That's how much wine you should reasonably be drinking per week. And then our other sponsor, we've had them since pretty much the very beginning, Nugg of Knowledge. They are the top place to get all of your legal-ish, like Delta-8, Delta-9, CBD, CBG. They've got a little bit of everything. They've got edibles, they've got flour, they've got vapes. They've got like teas and honeys and a bunch of other things like that. NuggofKnowledge.com, promo code FSM. Help out the network, help out the show, help out awesome libertarians that you know and love. And then come on back here and finish watching the rest of the show because it's going to be great. Without further ado, we have the great Harrison Kemp coming on. Harrison, how's it going?
I am doing awesome, David, and I am so happy to be hanging out with you again. It's been too long since we've done a show or just got to hang out in person like we did on our long voyage down to and from Pennsylvania years ago.
Man, that feels like so fucking long ago. That LPPA convention from hell.
It does. I stumbled across the baklava video the other day of me going, oh, yeah, it's my baklava because it was your baklava, but then I redistributed your baklava. You know, we had to teach a lesson about socialism, communism using baklavas, and you just so happened to be the victim. But it was a delicious baklava.
It really was. I love baklava. So tell us what has been exciting in the fight for liberty going on in the Great White North.
We have a lot of stuff going on. So right now we have a massive registration drive that we're doing. So basically we had a lawsuit against the state for unconstitutionally unenrolling all of our registered voters a few years ago. And so now we are kind of in crunch time where we have until November of 2024 to hit 10,000 registered voters, or we get taken off the registration cards again and kind of have to start the process over. We also have a bill in right now that's going to cut that number from 10,000 down to 5,000. So we've got a lot of stuff going on with ballot access here. That's really our big fight. If we can get ballot access here, maintain our qualified party status, it's going to make it a lot easier to get victories, both getting people in the House, getting people in the Senate, and just to be able to get legislation through. You know, we have some bills that we can get in right now, but we have to rely on Republicans and Democrats to to do it for us, and that's not a position we want to be in. So,
Yeah.
and it also makes it hard when, we've got a lot of bills that mean something to us that would start really very good conversations throughout the state about things like qualified immunity or about, First Amendment protections, things like that that we libertarians hold near and dear that the average person just doesn't think about.
Mm-hmm.
So really being able to get to a point in the state where we don't have to fight about ballot access anymore, and we can get our presidential candidate on the ballot with just a simple signature, like the other two parties can do, it would save us hundreds of thousands of dollars every election cycle, and it would make it a lot easier to be able to actually campaign here in the state
Mm-hmm.
for our presidential candidates on the national level than it would be to have to go door to door trying to collect signatures and then go out and campaign again. Just use all that effort one time to campaign. And we see it too. I mean, really big turnaround with our state house candidates, our state senate candidates. These folks that once our name is on the registration card and people are more used to hearing the word libertarian as an option, people inevitably end up agreeing with us on those things. We go to different events, whether they're cannabis-related events or whether they're gun-related events, and we take that world's smallest political quiz with us, and overwhelmingly, people tend to agree with the libertarian position, regardless of where we're at. So really what we've got going on, to sum all of that up, is we're making a big push for ballot access and trying to become one of the few states that have permanent ballot access, permanent qualified party status in the party. And we've gone out and hired a fundraiser to help us do that, someone who's making us a boatload of money so that we can go out and do this right and hire a professional company to come in, do our registration drives with us, just like we had to do back in 2018. But we need to do it a little bit more than we did back then and get over that 10,000 hurdle so that we don't get put in this position again.
Yeah, I know here in New York, we spend pretty much every dime that we raise through every single fundraiser and event and the convention, and everything is pretty much just to get us to be able to be on the ballot every 2 years. And Larry Sharp saved us a bunch of money in 2020 with Jorgensen's campaign, and the fact that we didn't have to do nearly that much because we actually had ballot access for the first time ever as a state, and we lost it right away. So we're right back into that where we're going to have to, we spent pretty much everything we had to try to get Larry on the ballot this year and didn't even do that, or last year I guess, and now we're going to have to fight even harder to get a presidential candidate on the ballot, and it's going to take everything we have as a state just to get them on the ballot, and there'll be nothing left to campaign with.
Yeah, and that's kind of the hard part, and really the hard thing about being a Libertarian Party activist is that the deck is stacked against us because of the limited resources we have, and when you need to go out and collect 5,000 signatures so that you can make the ballot, you've exhausted all your resources, and there's not enough money to run ads, there's not enough money to put on bigger events, and there's not enough money to pay people to go door to door for you, to actually campaign for you. I mean, it's one thing for people to sign a petition and say, yeah, whatever, you can be on the ballot. It's another for them to give you enough time to actually consider voting for you. And so that's one thing that we're going to be able to do. And it sets us up because here in Maine, we have a split congressional district set up. So we actually have 2 congressional districts, meaning a presidential candidate doesn't have to win the whole state to win an electoral vote. So we only need to win half of the state. And it puts us in a really interesting position to be one of the few states to ever get an electoral college vote. Because if we can get a candidate who we're able to get on the ballot by simply signing them up, just like the Republicans and the Democrats are able to do in the state, that would mean that we can put all of that money into a door-to-door campaign, into ads, into outreach, and they could actually spend some time up here campaigning with the goal of winning a congressional district and winning an electoral college vote. And that's something that we can do. And the path goes right through Maine. I love our neighbors, New Hampshire, beautiful folks. I love all of them. But the path for where a Libertarian Party electoral college ticker and vote is here in Maine.
100% agreed. There really isn't another state that I see getting that anytime. I mean, Nebraska has the same setup as you guys, but I don't think that we're nearly as strong of a movement in Nebraska as we are in Maine. So, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Not even a diss to like LP Nebraska, just more of a praise to not even LP Maine, but just like the spirit of the state of Maine. Very similar to New Hampshire. I think you guys have just bred into you a very libertarian kick that most states just don't. All like you guys tucked up there in the corner have always kind of been a little bit of a fuck the system area, like from the get go. So. Yeah. It's not up to me to decide what the meaning of libertarian is. It's up to, the bylaws and what we put together as a statement of principles and all that. But you know what I'm getting at. We need to create a party that's able to accept all these folks who maybe we don't agree on every single issue, or we don't agree on what the way to achieve the end goal of, say, ending qualified immunity or getting rid of this tax might be. But we agree that we need to do it. And that's where we need to really do a better job with coalition building and being able to work with people who are part of other groups that we would fight on other things. And I think it really comes down to this point where right now we have the option of fighting everybody because we're surrounded, or trying to work with everybody and achieve little pockets of freedom with each group that we can. And work with the Democrats on police bills and gun and drug bills, work with the Republicans on taxes and guns, work with the communists on anti-war stuff. And then we can just kind of fight them on the other fronts where we need to fight them. But we need to try and work with people where we can, because we're just so outnumbered right now. Yeah.
And that comes back to getting folks elected, getting on the ballot so that we can get people elected so we aren't outnumbered like this. Because it would be great to have 3 or 4 or 10 different elected libertarians who are able to just put their foot down and go, nope, we're not doing that. That's immoral. Here's a beautiful, eloquent speech on why the government should not even be considering this in the first place. And at that point, even if you're still losing on the votes, you have the ability to start changing people's minds. When you get 5, 6 people in a house of 153, they need your vote to make things happen. It starts getting to that point where you're kind of breaking down the 50-50 vote, and you're able to really get a lot done without having a lot of numbers on your side. But my point is, with all that, if you're someone who's thought about running for office or helping on a campaign in whatever state you're in, you really need to start thinking about it, because it doesn't take a lot of us in there to muck up the system and to start changing the system. So if you're in the state of Maine, or you really want to help us out because you believe in what we've got going on, email info@lpme.org. We'll find something with your skill set that you can do to help us out. If you're in your state and you want to do something, reach out to them. I'm sure there's someone there.
Fuck yeah. And if you don't want to be involved in the LP, we've always got a place for you, and you are the power.
And if you don't want to be involved in You Are the Power, there's always something else that you can do that's going to bring you happiness.
Right.
Maybe it's reading books. Maybe it's just listening to podcasts, whatever it may be.
Yeah. There really is not a shortage anymore of organizations to get involved in. That's one of the things that I'm trying to cover as much as I can on the show. Like last week I had, or I guess 2 weeks ago now, last week was supposed to be you, and then I had to cancel on you. 2 weeks ago now was Josh Eagle from Students for Liberty, and just talking about like the work that they're doing internationally, like all over the fucking globe, is just mind-boggling. That I was a student for technically 2 years, I guess, and a libertarian even for 2 more years after that outside of school before I even heard of them. And it's encouraging to find out how many of these organizations actually exist and how much they're growing, and then to have the LP alongside it also, like almost doubling in numbers since I first heard about it. It's getting bigger.
I think to kind of touch on something that you're getting at is, if there's one organization you're looking at and you're going, I don't really see my skill set working with them, or you know what, I don't really like their brand or their version of libertarianism or of the freedom movement that they're putting out, there's 1,000 more for you to go join.
Hell yeah.
There's the only reason to not be involved is you don't want to be involved. And if you don't want to be involved, that's totally fine. But if you want to be involved, there's no shortage of places you can go, things you can do. And we are seeing now that there's actually money in the liberty movement if you're willing to go out and find it and ask for it and do things that people value. I think one thing that I've had to really kind of suck it up and learn is that people don't really care about your individual dreams. Like my dream of, all right, now it's time to run for governor, because it's one thing that we can do as a party that's going to save us a lot of money down the road. And, trying to get people to buy into that, well, it was such a long shot with the way that the deck was stacked against us, the short notice we were given. Then we took a step back, we reorganized, and this lawsuit all finished itself. And now we have a clear path that is a reasonable path to being able to achieve the same goal, but in a different way. And I think that, we kind of can sometimes get discouraged when we ask someone at a door, like, to be a libertarian or an event to be a libertarian, and they say no. Or they're like, no, I would never, you guys don't stand a chance of winning, or whatever it may be. Just keep pushing. There's always that next person or some other idea or goal that you're going to come up with that is going to get buy-in. And that could be the thing that ends up making real positive change.
Something my old boss used to always say, he would always, early on in the training, he would always bring up kind of the funnel ratio of, how many calls equal how many conversations equal how many sales equal, and he would just constantly just be like, it's a numbers game, boys. It's a numbers game. He would just walk out of his office into the sales floor, just be like, it's a numbers game, boys, and walk back into his office. Like, that was his entire pep talk 3-4 times a day. And it stuck with me, thank God, in a really real way, because, so much of my life, not just the sales, which I know you can identify with also, but like the politics and the everything else, it's all a fucking numbers game. You have to get X amount of go fuck yourselves to get a single, oh yeah, that sounds cool. And you just got to figure out what that ratio is. And then every time you get a go fuck yourself, you're just like, all right, 7 more to go. Okay, 6 more to go. And then you just kind of have to keep that mindset. Otherwise you get so bogged down.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the hard part about it is that you'll feel like, I just gave the best pitch. I just asked this guy the perfect question. I laid the trap to ask him to, donate, become a member, join the mailing list, go to an event, whatever you asked him to do, right? And they said no. And you're like, well, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe this is stupid. Maybe nobody's going to agree with me. Just keep going, because the next time you get that yes, you're going to be like, I did something. I helped grow the movement. If you get, and this is going to make it sound really tedious, but if you get 2 yeses at an event over the course of a year, you could have 24 new people doing things. That's huge. So it starts slow, but it starts to build. And then you could think of it almost like a pyramid scheme, where it's like, hey, I bring you in, we train you up, we teach you how to talk to people, you know, we get you involved in the events so that you know what's going on. And then you go to events and start working events and start handing out literature and door knocking, et cetera, et cetera. And it all kind of snowballs and builds itself up to this point where we have 100 people around the state who are active doing things. And then you get to the point where you've got 500 people and 1,000 people. You know, if you could get 1,000 people in your state, even if it takes you 5 years, if you could get 1,000 people who are actively doing things, doesn't matter really what they're doing, as long as they're doing something in a concerted effort, you're going to be able to stumble into victories. And then you'll be able to start, you know, figuring it out from there. But yeah, there's just so much to do.
I like the phrase you just used, stumble into victory. Because one of the things that I think the Liberty movement should do a little bit more of is paying attention to what like the DSA and like the Bernie Bro kind of crew did, like how they went from like Occupy Wall Street into like what they are now, which was a total like stripping of their values and losing of all of their like reason to exist. And you know, we can talk about that, but what they actually did was go from a bunch of people in the street to a dozen elected congressmen in less than a decade, right? And there's a way that they did that, and it's not what we're doing. It's not anything like what we're doing. But one of the things that they did multiple times was stumble into victory, like you're talking. Like plenty of these people, you know, just hit the perfect situation. Like whether or not you think AOC was like handpicked by like the Democratic establishment and not some like people's candidate, whether or not she was is irrelevant, because she campaigned as the people's candidate, and therefore, like, as far as the people are concerned, this is how it worked. You know, she only won because the person she was running against in the primary was one of the most horrible, like, corrupt people ever, hit 2 huge scandals right in the primary, and she ended up winning in a landslide, and then going on to win what was a very, very, very easy general because it's a solid blue district. You know, it wasn't her taking on Chuck Schumer, right? It was her taking on somebody was not that popular yet outside of Washington. He was supposed to be the next Speaker of the House instead of Pelosi, but like no one in New York knew who he was. He wasn't important. He wasn't recognized, except for the multiple times he was in the news for his scandals. Like if we could pick like specific opponents that are just really bad in a really specific way, and you know, forget everything else that we might want to campaign on and strictly campaign on, hey, we're not super corrupt, we'd actually get somewhere.
There is something to be said for boiling it down to just 1 or 2 very basic issues, and having one of those issues being a differentiator. You know, I'm not corrupt, and I want to give you back more local control, or, you know, I'm not corrupt, and I'm from here, I'm one of you, I'm local, I'm the people's champion, you know. But yeah, there is something to be said for just picking people who are weak that have always been in very solid districts. And especially if you find districts, this is something that, you know, we're going to be working on, is finding districts where you have candidates that usually run unopposed. And some states, like specifically Pennsylvania, they have an amazing ballot access rule, which is why they have so many elected libertarians, where, you know, they get notified of all the places that don't have anyone running. Then they can run as a minor party as libertarians and get elected. And those are places like you need to really focus in on your ballot laws and on your election laws, and try to find places like that where you can sneak out some easy wins. Because the more elected libertarians there are, the more elected libertarians there are, not only does it build the brand, but it builds the familiarity with the idea, with the concept of libertarianism. Because if you're an elected libertarian to whatever partisan position, that no matter how low level it is, but you're on the local news and people see libertarian, they're going to go, what the hell is that? And they're going to Google it. And then next thing you know, you've just woken some people up and you've shown them at least their first introduction to what libertarianism is. Yeah. And I think, with that, we sometimes get really caught up in running just the most pure ideological campaign we can and trying to sound too smart. And we need to cut that down. We need to just talk to people about the issues they care about. And it's like Jackie Cooper always says, this old sales adage of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you really need to try and learn what the voters that are going to be in your area, or what the people that you're trying to get as members and voters, what they care about. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. And that's one thing I think we've done really well here. We've kind of created this environment among our state committee and among our county chairs where we encourage bad ideas, because bad ideas help us get to good ideas. And it's kind of like, you don't know that you need to go 12 degrees right unless you go 30 degrees left. So we always try to encourage ideas, and we try to come up with new ways to create projects or solve problems that have been plaguing us for a long time, because most states, we've been fighting the same battles for a long time, but we continually fight them in the same way and get the same results, and then go, woe is me. So we've been trying to come up with new ways to solve these problems, and I think we've been doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah. I was trying, the reason I was looking behind me, I was trying to grab your book because I thought it was on this bookshelf, but it's on the one in my room. I was going to be like, because you were going on like a little bit of a salesy monologue there, which I always love about your...
That one right there. I know you can't see it because it's too far away, but it's right there.
Closing Freedom. Guys, check it out. I'll put a link in the description. I don't know if there is one yet because it's all like LP Maine stuff right now, but I'll throw a link in the description too.
Yeah, I just sent you all the LP Maine stuff. I have a couple of books out. If you'd like to buy them, I would appreciate that. All the money that I make off that goes directly back to the LP of Maine. I make like less than $1 or $3 a book that you buy, so it's not a tremendous amount, but if you want to make a real donation to help us get some ballot access funds going, every $8 is one registration that we can purchase and pay someone to go out and get. So keep that in mind as you're donating at lpme.org/contribute.
All right. Fuck yeah. I love it. Love it when we can sneak the plugs in seamlessly.
You gotta sneak them in wherever you can.
Oh yeah, that's something that I really need to get better at, is the like shameless plugs thing. My ex used to be like really obnoxious about it, but like I was really thankful for it because she would always just be like, "This is my boyfriend. He has a podcast," and like she would always say it like super shittily and like usually to libertarians, so it's like a joke, but it would usually spark like, "Oh, well, which one's your podcast?" And I got a couple of people on my show because of those conversations, and like she actually set up a couple of interviews herself that were fantastic. Like now I'm back to just like being super shitty at it. Like I'll talk to somebody for 2 hours and be like, "Man, I'd really love to have them on my show." Shucks.
Nart.
Right.
You need to be shameless. And, you need to be shameless when asking people if it's something that you want. Again, this is all with the assumption that it's something you want. If you're trying to build a party, an organization, if you're trying to build your campaign, your podcast, whatever it may be, you need to shamelessly ask people for their time or their money. And the reason is because those are the only two things that we can get from folks that are of value, is time or money. Support is awesome. A like on a Facebook page is amazing, and you should like facebook.com/Libertarian Party of Maine down in the comments. But my point is that we want those things so that we can get you to come out to an event, so that we can have your time to meet you, so that you can knock doors, so that you can help build something here. or we want your money so that we can help encourage other people to do those things, or pay for conventions and pay for candidates, et cetera, et cetera. It's just like any other organization or group that does good things. You know, they need time, they need money, and they need you to, you know, help them out if you believe in their cause. And that's why, David, I think you need to do more asking people to join your podcast and come on and do things, because you have something that you believe in that other people should believe in. You know, I don't know how many folks we got watching right now, but I bet the 62.3 million people across the world that are watching, they're ecstatic. I mean, you're kind of like the Joe Rogan of places you've never been. So I think you just need to ask more people to come on, be shameless about it, and you'll be good.
Well, I appreciate the support and the pep talk. I am getting better, I think. I'm getting better on Twitter. I'll say that much. It's been a lot easier reaching out to people, because if you follow me, that at least means that you at some point in time saw something makes you vaguely interested in what I have to say, and might like see me as at least like an equal or someone interesting. And so if they follow me, I'm shameless in the DMs. If you follow me, just know that if I think you're cool enough to be on the show, I will just DM you. Like that'll be a thing. I had one guy respond and like, sorry, I have like a bot that just follows people. I don't actually care.
Damn. That's aggressive.
He didn't say it quite that mean, but he said that, like, you know, he just has a bot that goes out and like follows people, because, you know, most people will follow back if like a verified account with 100,000 followers follows you. You're like, ooh, cool person, who's he? So I know that's a thing that people do. But I'll take advantage of that, because I can still get into their actual DMs that way, and not the like request DMs. So if you're going to use a bot to try to trick me into following you, I'm going to take advantage of that and DM you. And if you ignore me, that's fine. But, you know, there's a couple people that haven't. I'm getting Mark Pellegrino back on the show in a couple of weeks. So that'll be fun.
Ooh. That's really cool. He was Lucifer, I remember.
Yes.
And he started the Constitution Party?
Yes. So last time we talked a lot about that, and we almost got into a little bit of an argument, because I had to ask the question. I was like, why did you start a different party? Like, what was so bad about ours? And he answered the question honestly, and I was a little bit offended, and we had a little bit of a back and forth. But this time we're actually talking about his charity. Him and his wife do a thing where they run like an acting school for like underprivileged kids, and so we're going to be talking about that. Should be fun. Yeah, but back to Maine. Tell me about some of the people in Maine other than yourself that are rock stars and making differences.
So we've got quite a few of them. Jeremy Lazat, who is our Central Region rep, has been doing a really good job of trying to organize our Augusta area, Kennebec County area, which is one of the bigger population centers we have. And he also does all of our IT stuff, which has been really a chore for him. He's done a great job getting it all organized from where it was, and, you know, getting through the national kind of merger that they did, going over to the new system a while back. And it's really been kind of exciting to see, like, now that we're able to start using all these different features that the website has, what we're able to do with it. And we've got Samantha Brown, who's our legislative director. She was able to get several bills in. I think we got 4 bills in this year, which is kind of that's a big record for us. You know, last time around we had 1. This time we got 4. So we're hoping to keep that progress going and just keep growing and growing that, and being able to make a difference even if we don't have someone elected. But like I said before, it's different when you have to get somebody who's not necessarily a libertarian, or they're maybe a small L libertarian, maybe they were even a Ron Paul libertarian, but they are kind of sucked in by their party and they can only do certain things and they can't do other things. So being able to have, you know, people who aren't bound by that, who have the free will to just do whatever bills they want. That'll be a huge help for us in the number and the scope of bills we're able to do next session. Bonnie Lee has been helping to grow Penobscot County, which is one of our bigger counties here as well. And then we've got, I want to give a special shout out to our fundraiser, Scott, who's been really helping to grow our war chest, really, because without a big war chest, we're not going to be able to pay people to go out and do the door-to-door stuff and the registration drive later in the year, so that we're able to put ourselves in a position to run candidates in 2024 and to actually get people elected and succeed in this 10,000 voter registration that we need. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank Kate, who's our secretary, for all the work that she's been doing, getting all of our newsletters out and our hot takes on a weekly basis. Just the amount of work that goes into that and getting those emails out twice a week consistently is pretty impressive. So we get a lot of good stuff out too. You know, we tend to write a lot of our own stuff, and then we'll share some stuff from antiwar.com or libertarian.com, the Libertarian Institute, excuse me. So we try to give you a lot of different takes on libertarian positions, both from a local standpoint on local issues and also on just some national things that are, you know, in the news. But totally sign up for the emails, because we have a lot of them coming out, and it's a great way to stay up to date on all the different events that we have going on and keep up to date with the registration drive.
Hell yeah.
And I know I'm forgetting people, so forgive me.
If you're watching this from LP Maine, you have my permission to text Harrison right now and just curse him out and be like, how could you forget me?
I do need to thank Marco too, because Marco's our new treasurer. So we had a gentleman, Sean Lavasser, who's been active in the party since October of 1992. And he stepped down recently as treasurer after 30 years of being an active member of the party. And when I say active, I mean he's been in an elected position like 90% of the time. So he stepped down, and unfortunately we lost him, but Marco stepped up and took his place and has been doing a great job keeping all of our funds figured out and whatnot with this registration drive that we've got going on, making sure everything's properly earmarked. And I do not envy his job. I have a full plate. I got a lot of stuff I'm doing, but the amount of just data entry and figuring out what the numbers are that he's got to put up with is amazing. And he needs a big special thanks. So
shout out the treasurers, especially like that. What you just described is a nightmare scenario for anyone that knows anything about finance. Like having to take over for somebody that's been in a treasurer's position for a decade plus, like who's got their thing and all of their stuff. Yeah. And especially if they're of the older generation, 90% of it's going to be on paper, and you have to like read through all of it and switch it all. It's a nightmare. I've had to do it before. It's no fun. So my thoughts and prayers to your new treasurer, and yeah, big shout out to all the treasurers of the world, because fuck that job.
Yeah, I first off, I will never be a treasurer. Nope. I have made that decision. Nope. That's something that I've sworn to. Mm-hmm. But also, after kind of seeing what he does, because when somebody's newer, you want to make sure they're doing it right. And it's hard when you don't even know how to do it because you've never had to do it. Yeah. So, it was a very interesting time, but thankfully we got through it. We figured it out, and we're rocking and rolling. So, we have a lot of folks that have been around for a long time too. Like when we went to convention this last time for the national convention, we had 4 main chairs at our convention. We had myself, Jim Baines, who was the previous state chair. We had a gentleman named Sean Lavasser, who was the treasurer, but at one point he was also our chair. And then we had Jorge Maderal. we had Jorge Maderal there as well. And so we had 4 chairs, 3 prior chairs and the current chair all there. And the reason is because Liberty has staying power here in Maine. All 4 of us are different kinds of libertarians. We don't agree on the exact issues of, or the exact solutions to the issues, but Liberty has staying power here. We don't come in, do it for a year or 2, and then run away. We stay, we fight, and even someone like Jorge, who's moved away for work, he still made the trip out to Nevada. He was still active enough in the party to where it was like, yeah, he should be one of our delegates. And so that's one of those things that I don't know if other states have that track record, but I know that we're really proud that we've created that here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
well,
most of the time our state chairs move away, or I mean, I guess unfortunately in one of our cases died, but that's a separate situation. He also just yeeted himself out of the movement when he stopped being chair because of health problems, but still, we do not have any sort of that staying power like what you're talking about. Everyone makes it to chair, they last there for a little bit, and then they're either like fuck New York or fuck the LP and just dip. And that's kind of been the track record with both our chairs and our gubernatorial candidates.
Well, one thing that, and again, it kind of comes down to what is your state doing to take advantage of people's skill sets and the things that they enjoy doing, right? And I think a state like New York is obviously going to be a lot different than Maine. We just have different people. Folks here in Maine, we tend to stay in Maine our whole lives. Maybe we might move away when it's time to retire, but we tend to live here for most of our lives. That with New York having the massive New York City and people coming in and out of there, I totally see why people might end up, coming in for a couple of years and then leaving, because that's what you do in the big city sometimes.
Yeah.
But
plus, if you care about liberty, New York is not the place for you. If
right.
you can exist in Maine, and it's not like some utopia, right? You guys don't have a delegate, what's the word I'm looking for? Majority. There we go. In the state house or something like that. But you can exist there as a libertarian and still feel okay about your life. Similar to I think Colorado has a similar feel, or New Hampshire, even maybe Texas or Florida in a couple of ways. You can kind of exist and feel okay about yourself. If you care about liberty at all, staying in New York just sounds like the worst idea possible.
Well, that's why, I invite the entire Libertarian Party of New York to come move to Maine, register as libertarians, become members, become part of your local counties, help us out. We need you. You can help us win here. Imagine the taste of a libertarian victory in your lifetime, but it's not going to happen in New York. It could happen very easily here in Maine, though.
Do you guys have a Texarkana situation where I could live somewhere and be both a New Hampshire and Maine resident?
We do not have a town like that I know of.
Shucks. That would be kind of dope. That would be the thing to do for the liberty movement. Is just 2 for 1. Vote twice. 1 in each state.
But
be great.
There are places down in the western part of the state where you can be right on the New Hampshire border. You can be right there, and the only difference is you'll still have legal cannabis, the same or better gun laws than they have, and I mean it's a good way to live. As they say, it's the way life should be. I don't know what life should be, but I don't imagine getting taxed exorbitantly for it. But that's just me. I do think, so one thing that we've been trying to do, right, because kind of all of this comes down to brand awareness, If you don't have enough brand awareness, you're not going to change any minds, because you're not going to have enough people to do anything to change those minds with. And so this comes back to the idea of who do I want to give a shout out to? And Robin Belcher, who's one of our county chairs, she's put together this protest series. So the fourth Saturday of every month from 11 to 1, we go down to the Capitol building and we protest something different. So this last time we did ending the wars and funding for Ukraine. And we ended up, for the very first protest we've done in a long time, on a chilly January Saturday, we got 13 of us out there. And it was a lot of folks I hadn't seen in a long time. Some of them I'd never met before. And there was overwhelming positive support about it. Now, the one thing that kind of irritated us, but we already knew was going to happen, is that none of the media came. None of the media responded to emails. They didn't publish the op-ed about it. They didn't get the message out the way that we had given them the message to get out, you know. And this is just kind of something that we have to put up with. Is sometimes the local media will be interested, sometimes they won't. They have different things that they care about, and anti-war just isn't one of them.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I guess, you know, that's one of the things we're trying to solve with free speech media is actually, you know, covering stuff like that and for the people that do care. But the problem is that segregation, you know, we have to reach outside of the movement and actually, you know, bring people in, and that requires getting on what they already watch, not just, you know, being something that they could watch if they decided to randomly, spontaneously start caring about shit.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a struggle that I'm not sure how exactly we fully overcome it, but I think that there have been candidates that are doing at least a little bit of a better job, and with numbers, like you're saying, comes that coverage. You know, if you're a candidate that's gonna get into the debates and like actually make a showing of themselves and like actually possibly, even if what they're talking about is, you know, are you gonna split the vote? Like, you know, they were talking about in Pennsylvania or Arizona this year, you know, which we objectively did split the vote in multiple states in 2022. We definitely, like, as a party, caused certain victories and defeats throughout the country. And, you know, if you're even able to be talked about like that, or like a Chase Oliver, you know, that'll at least get you some media attention that you can roll into maybe another run. He's trying to roll it up into a presidential run. I would have rolled it down into like maybe another congressional run personally, but you know, I think that there are paths to getting that traditional media, but it's very fucking difficult.
It is super difficult, and it really does too also come down to, like, they don't want to talk to us until it's too late for us, usually, for us to be able to actually have a chance of getting on the debate stage or really getting the conversation going about us early enough so that we could pick up some steam and be considered an actual candidate. And it's hard because I think when you start from the libertarian position of in the race, you're already so far behind, where in a lot of states, we're not even a qualified party. So there's no libertarian option on a registration ballot. Most people have never seen the word or heard the word. And then you're going around saying, well, I'm a libertarian. My name's David Fite, Libertarian for Congress, right? Then people have to go do Google work to find out what a libertarian is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's if they're very, very interested in what you had said. Most people aren't even going to care because they've already selected based on what party they're a part of, who they're voting for. Yeah. You know, so getting out in, it really comes down to trying to get in front of people. And like the media is going to be a tool that we're going to have to use, but they're not going to help us until it's too late usually. Yeah. So you need to get out in front of the voters themselves, and you need to start using media outlets. Like this is one thing that we're going to, you know, I'm not giving away too many secrets here, but I'll give one away for free for everybody. Look into who the local content creators in your area are, right? Do you have some kind of local celebrity, or do you have some kind of Twitter person or Instagram, whatever, you know? Just start looking for these folks that have followings that are interested in what you do. You know, maybe it's a gun group that's got a local following, build coalitions with content creators. You know, it's something that we're starting to look into because there's a couple of content creators from here in Maine that are super libertarian, and they love libertarianism. They do libertarianism on their channel without using those words, you know. So trying to put together joint events with folks like that, or we have a local musician that we're putting an event together. His name's The Real Young Swag. He's a Christian rapper, actually. He's got pretty interesting music. If you like rap or Christian music, you should check him out. And even if you don't, you should like him out because he's a fellow libertarian, and you should just, you know, click a button, support him. Click a button, folks.
Fuck yeah.
So
I'm not a Christian anymore, but I'm always down for some Christian rap. Always.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I'm not a Christian, nor do I really listen to a lot of rap, but I find it interesting. And plus, he's a really big supporter. You know, he's somebody who's commenting on a lot of our posts and whatnot, and he's really interested. He's got a voice, and he's one of those folks that it seems like he's one of those people that's down for the long run. You know, he's not just like, oh, this is someone that I can get to give me 5 minutes of fame. You know, he's been around for a couple of years, just liking our stuff and commenting on stuff. And, you know, you can always tell when someone's like, what's the word? A grifter. You can always tell when grifters are. And as Hotep Jesus says, stop grifting. And I think we in the Liberty Movement get a lot of folks that are grifters, you know.
It's
and
so easy.
Part of it is so easy.
We're the worst.
And that's why.
We're so gullible.
We are, because it's like, oh, anyone who's, you know, kind of interested in what we got going on, or is, you know, coming out to events, or is liking my podcast stuff, well, they're a libertarian. Why not bring them onto a show or get them out to something, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's also too, like, from a party perspective, you know, we're not showing anybody the keys to the castle. We're not giving away voter data or, you know, a member data or anything like that to someone that shows up to an event. Mm-hmm. So the most they're going to walk away with there is something that would have been on Facebook anyway, some like general plan and strategy that we're doing. Yeah. So we're very open to people coming in, and so yeah, I actually wouldn't mind if we had like a, you know, some Democrat or Republican operative come into a meeting sometime, because they might learn something about, you know.
Yeah.
They come hang out with us trying to steal some info from us. They might just turn over to the good side.
Yeah, I mean, I was working with Tom Queter's campaign in New York when he was running for U.S. Senate against Chuck Schumer. We went to a Queens Republicans meeting to talk to their candidates because I think their primary hadn't happened yet, so they were still, you know, arguing amongst themselves about who their candidate even was going to be. And like Diane Sayers people were there too. But I ended up like smoking weed with about half a dozen people outside afterwards. And, you know, it's not something you would typically expect stereotypically from, you know, a bunch of people that were at a GOP meeting, is, you know, them all just standing outside. You know, I was the only white person of the smoke circle on top of that. You know, another thing that kind of breaks down stereotypes. And, you know, we were talking, and pretty much all of them agreed, like, we're only Republicans because the Republican Party is the only one that has a shot. And I'm like, you live in Queens. No, they don't.
Right.
You guys are just as much of a long shot as we are. You might beat us every year, but you're just as likely to win as we are. And they're like, yeah, but, you know, we can at least rally around a presidential candidate and might be able to do something there. And I'm like, who? Like,
right.
What are you talking about?
The only way they're going to get a Republican who could win New York is if they're a Democrat in Republican clothes, which really isn't that
Donald Trump.
Like Democrats and Republicans. They're really the same thing. Well, that was you stole the punchline, which was they already had one and he still couldn't win the state. He was even from there and he couldn't win the state.
Right.
So the argument of, well, we could have a good presidential candidate that can make something happen, we have a better shot of winning the state of Maine with a Libertarian than they do a Republican.
Oh yeah.
So
I'll out myself here. I tried to get the job as Trump's New York coordinator in 2020. It was a long shot, but I was willing to take the money to try to flip the state red, because I think he could have done it in 2020. Was the 1 year where red could have won. We're way down in population now, to the point where it's never going to fucking happen, because everyone that left was a Republican. But 2020 was like a sweet spot. He could have won if he tried. He didn't even try. Like, there was, I think, 2 campaign events in the city, and then nothing upstate at all. Nothing.
Yeah, and upstate is where all his voting base would have been in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Upstate New York, like that Cortland, Syracuse area, that's a lot more conservative red than
my block has Trump 2024 flags on it. Like, I don't have to walk 100 yards to see multiple Trump campaign signs for 2024.
Right.
Like, they are everywhere here. A couple of well-placed events up here, like a week of him actually here, and then an amount of manpower spent and then just a hard anti-Biden campaign in New York City, which would have been super easy, because he sucks, and most of New York City's voting population is still progressive left, not establishment left, and he could have done it, but he didn't. And they never will.
Well, I, for one, I think that had Donald Trump done a couple of different things, right? Had Donald Trump come out and basically, not only had he been more honest, which I know it's kind of hard to be like, some of the things he was saying were so crazy, but I think he diluted the honesty that he said with all the bullshit that he put out there, right? So when he's talking about his opponent, this time talking about Joe, he would fill it in with so much dumb shit.
Mm-hmm.
So many of these little comments that were easily proven false, that the bigger claims couldn't stick. And even though they were true, they couldn't stick, because, well, who's going to trust him? When you lie to me 4 times out of 5, I'm not going to believe the 5th. So I also think that someone like Trump, who was from there, should have had an easier time winning. But I think there's just a lot of folks that were from there who are already, they're Democrats, so they're going to vote against the Republican just because it's their favorite pastime. But I also think that they didn't like his past business dealings. They had a nasty taste about some of the news clippings that had been about him and things that. And that was what helped to make their decision. It was, well, I can't trust him because the news has said X, Y, or Z about him. Whether it's right, wrong, whether his decision to do that was right or wrong, that was the opinion that had got formed of him. And I do think that we should be taking people's business dealings. I think we should take the way that they treat humans into account when deciding to send them to office or not.
Yeah.
But I think that if you're going to compare policies and look at things from all right, he may have had a couple of bad business deals where he ripped someone off, but Joe Biden really pushed legislation that put millions of Americans in prison for victimless crimes. Which one's worse here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm no fan of Trump. I'm no fan of Biden. I think they're both horrible people. But if we're weighing the pros and the cons here, I'd take a guy who said a couple of mean things over a guy who, is part of the reason that we have to still fight these massive drug laws that exist.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
I have to personally agree, which is why I would have done what I said, to flip New York red. Because honestly, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, don't have enough money to do that, I would have bet 2 very long shot things, and I would have lost both of them. But I would have bet that New York went red and Texas went blue in 2020, and they basically would have offset. I think New York has 2 more votes than Texas or something like that. but wouldn't have even have been enough to sway the election. If that had happened, Biden still would have won. And so I don't know. I just thought it would be fun, like shake things up. Let's break down these solid things, which, to something you mentioned earlier about like, the kind of people that run unopposed a lot, to drastically switch subjects, but also kind of not, these people that, we know how it's going to happen every single year. It's always a red district. The Blues don't even run anybody. Those are the places that we can shake things up and actually make something happen. And that's the kind of thing that's actually going to, back to the other conversation, get mainstream media attention. If we can take out a state house district that's exclusively red, and we know we only have to fight it one way, and the guy's been there for forever. Nobody really knows who he is. Nobody really likes him. He's just kind of been running unopposed, primary and general, again and again and again. Those are people that you can take out with someone that's actually a member of the community and people know and like.
Well, let's say that you do this campaign, but you lose. Okay, you run against a Republican, you run against a Democrat who's an incumbent, who hasn't lost in X number of years. Can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you run against this person who hasn't lost in X number of years, and you only get 25% of the vote, right? Well, how many emails did you collect off of that? How many social media contacts did you collect off of that? Hopefully, you collected a lot. Hopefully, you collected, if you got, I don't know, a 10,000 person voting district and you got 2,500 votes. Hopefully, you got 500 emails, right? If you got 500 emails and social media contacts out of that, that's a lot of folks that you can send surveys to or send petitions to that you can then use to pressure that person that actually won to vote more in line with what our position is or your position is, because you can take then a big stack of petitions when it's time to vote on a bill and say, this is 50 of your constituents who all oppose this and are urging you to vote against it. Who's going to bring them 51 from the other side? No one's doing that.
Right.
So if you can do that, and then, maybe you lost this time. Guess what? So what? There's 2 more years, then you run again. A year from now, you start planning getting your campaign going.
Yeah.
A loss can be, all right, well, I learned something, or it can be, all right, this was the start of my actual change. The political change that I'm going to make starts with this loss, because like I lost when I ran for governor, totally lost, wasn't even on the ballot. Got emails, got contacts, was able to shift that into other ways to apply pressure to legislators, to apply pressure to make change. So just because you lose when you run for one of those positions doesn't mean that it has to be an all for naught. Like, you can still make a lot of change as a loser if you're willing to put in the work after you've lost the election.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna give you guys something for free here. Like, this is a great, like, 4-year strategy. You run for state house or state senate, you lose. In that race, you establish one really, really solid activist somewhere that, has community outreach potential, or like already established contacts, maybe they're a local business owner, something like that. Pick one person from that campaign. They don't even actually have to be on your staff. They just have to be like a supporter or surrogate, like around. Promote them during it. Give them as much speaking time as possible. Run them for mayor the following year in their town. Have them actually win. And then run again for that same election, having built on that email list that Harrison's talking about, the social media following, everything else, having the endorsement of an elected fucking mayor, and possibly actually win that time.
That's a great plan. That needs to get clipped up and sent out. It was a great plan.
I appreciate it. That's kind of what I want to do. So in New York, we have something special that enables us to do something a little bit more like what the DSA did in a kind of icky way. But we have fusion voting, and 7 other states do too. I don't think Maine is one of them. But we're allowed to run as many parties as we want that we can get their endorsement or, petition them onto the ballot. So I can run as a Republican in the primary, get the Republican line, but also in the general be on the Libertarian line and the Democrat line and the conservative line and whatever else, So in New York, if, back to what we were talking about earlier, we pick like a state house race that's just like a really shitty Republican. We can talk to the Democrats ahead of time who never run anyone but have guaranteed ballot access because they're Democrats in New York. All they have to do is sign a thing and say, hey, we want to knock this guy out, regardless of what you think about us, that we're better than that guy. And just give us we're gonna run and try to knock him out in the primary. But if we don't, we want your ballot line, like win or lose, we want your line in the general. We can do that with all the parties, including the Libertarian Party. The only one that won't do it is the Greens, because it's in their bylaws that if you're on really any other literal, like real party, you can't be on their party line. But we don't have that bylaw. And so, you can rack up the rest of them before anyone casts a ballot, and then run that Republican primary, run a super Republican campaign, call yourself a Republican. You'd have to be a registered Republican to do it. Go full camouflage into the Republican Party. And then if you win, you can switch all of your campaign signs and all of your literature and all of your everything for the general, which you're guaranteed to win, and put the word Libertarian on everything. Run as an actual Libertarian candidate. Tell people to check the boxes Libertarian, and they'll check it all over. You'll probably win on the Republican line, not the Libertarian line, but you can go into office with an L next to your name at the end of it.
Interesting. I heard that we have something like that up this year. That would make you be able to get nominations from multiple parties, and I think the idea of the idea of the person who put it forward is that we would end up eventually supporting them in one of their races if they ran as a different party, which, depending on the bylaws we have at the time, may not be out of the question. But the way that our bylaws are currently structured isn't something we're able to do. But that's also because our voting laws for the state currently say you can only receive one party's endorsement and run as one party. So who knows what the future will hold, depending on how that law shakes out when it's all done. It's definitely something that we're going to try to use to our advantage to get Democrats to endorse us in areas where, like you were saying, Republicans have been winning, and for some reason Dems can't get a foothold in there, but we might be able to. Or vice versa, take out a Democrat where Republicans just can't. And I think that, like, a lot of stuff that we're trying to do right now, it really comes down to changing hearts and minds at the local level, like trying to get the counties more involved, trying to get folks to really get out there and start making those connections now who are going to be running in 2024. Because even though it's way too early to announce, it's too early to start officially forming a campaign team and a platform and all that stuff. It's the perfect time to start getting your name out there, putting events together, and just getting the feel of what it's like to organize something and to be part of the group, right? Because the goal is to have the state committee and the state party support our candidates. And we would like to have 20 candidates that we put up for partisan races. So the sooner that these people are able to come forward, the sooner that we can start helping them build those teams, or getting them involved in different trainings, or getting them to meet different people in their area who can hook them up with contacts. There's always people in your county that you should know if you want to run for office. And I really think that we need to start that process now. So if you want to run for office, or if you want to help somebody who's running for office, it's time to start reaching out. I mean, we really need to start planning now, because what we always do is wait till the last minute and then we rush to get on the ballot, and then we have a rushed campaign. And it's time to start breaking that cycle, right? It's time to upset our own cycle of failure and start a new precedent of planning ahead for victory. And if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to win. You know, if we can't get 10 candidates together by the time that we hold our convention this summer who are willing to come up and say, hey, I'm planning on running for this position, then we're going to be in a very difficult spot come early next year or next summer when it's time to really start putting the pedal to the metal and getting candidates together, because it's already 2023.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have that long till the election cycle comes up again.
Yeah, you said a few years ago when you were talking about the BLM protests in 2020, and I was like, fuck, dude, that was a few years ago. I still say last year sometimes when talking about 2020. Like, I'm not kidding. I do have to disagree slightly, though, real quick, with what you were saying. I don't think it's too early to get a campaign team together, at least a manager, a treasurer, and an events director, because if you can have those three people, maybe not officially as a campaign team doing it as a campaign, but if you can have a team of like 4 or 5 around you doing the getting your name out, putting things together, getting the feel of it, if you can have like an events director set up that's doing that with you and like setting up the events and, you know, getting that practice in also, it's really good practice. You know, if you can have, you know, recruit a treasurer from like a local like charity or something like that you can do these events with, and then just kind of like be like, hey, you want to be our treasurer too? Thanks, cool. You know, you can start building the team, I think, now, and then obviously like making it official maybe in a few months. But
yeah, I mean, definitely you can start building that team, but my point was, I don't want people to feel like they need to say, all right, I'm running a campaign, here's my whole team and all that right away. Like, if you want to run for office, just reach out to us and say, hey, I want to run for office. This is what I'm thinking about. Let's start the conversation now. Let's start getting to that point where we can build that loose starting campaign team. Let's make sure it's something you want to do, you know, and if it's not, because the hard part is a lot of people don't understand how much of a time suck it is, or they underestimate how much of a time suck it can be. Like, and it's hard because sometimes, you know, you'll go out, you'll knock doors for 2 hours a day, and, you know, that's a good day. If you can do 2 hours every day, 14 hours a week, if you work a full-time job, you're doing what you can do, right?
Yeah.
But once you start doing it every day, you're like, man, this is a lot of work. And then I've got meetings with my other team that I got to do, at yada, 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 events. And people can get overwhelmed by it because they think that it's something much bigger than it is. But we're working on trying to bring together a team of people who've done it before, who've ran campaigns that have won, and trying to break it down into manageable tasks to where it's not overwhelming enough. Because we only have a part-time legislature here. You only make less than 16 grand to be part of the legislature.
Yeah.
So we're looking for people who are, you know, they're going to have to work full-time jobs. That's just the reality of it. And trying to fit all of that in with their schedule and help them work that out and help them build their campaign teams. So yeah, it's definitely time to start coming forward. And if you've got a campaign team that comes pre-built, like one of our candidates last time around, Brian Stevens up in Calais did, or excuse me, yeah, Calais. Brian, he was up in Calais, came with his own campaign team. You know, wanted a little bit of help with event promotion from like the state party, but that was it. And that was perfect. And then we've had other candidates who come in and they've got really no help other than maybe their spouse. And we can help them too. So whatever level you're at, we can work with you. We can get you taken care of. And, you know, we have convention coming up on June 10th. It's going to be in Hollowell. We're going to be posting the tickets for sale soon. Got a couple of little things that we're trying to finish confirming before we send them out for sale. But it's looking like this is going to be one of our biggest conventions yet. And if you're thinking about running for office, reach out to us now, because we would like to start introducing all of you guys at convention start introducing you to donors, start introducing you to activists and people who can help coordinate for you. And we need to start doing that now. So.
Speaking of spouses, something new we're doing on the show is a question from the missus, because she doesn't think that my show is interesting enough. So, Mr. Harrison, would you rather never be able to bend your elbows or your knees?
Ooh, that's a fascinating one. I'd have to say knees.
Why?
Well, so I already have one knee that's kind of jacked up, so I've been in a chalupa leg brace for quite a while. I'm used to not being able to bend a knee. I feel like I could do what that grandfather from King of the Hill does, where you just kind of waddle everywhere. But if I couldn't bend my arms, I couldn't type right. I couldn't I couldn't talk. I'd feel very weird if my arms were always stretched out and I couldn't bend them. So I would have to go with never bend my knees again.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you. I thankfully I have a little bit more of a heads up on these questions than y'all do, but definitely think I would agree, knees.
Yeah, and plus too, it's like, okay, so you can't bend your knees. You just got to leave your shoes so that you can slip them on all the time. Your pants are probably going to be easier to get because you're not going to have that weird thing where you've got an angle going on that you can't pull them past. You're always going to be tall enough to reach whatever. Your posture is probably going to improve. There's all kinds of advantages here,
Yeah. And you can make a lot of puns as an anarchist about never bending a knee to the state.
There you go. There you go. I like that.
So I definitely, you were talking about your political director, Samantha, and I definitely want to get her on the show to elaborate more on this. But tell me what, you mentioned a few bills that you have on the agenda for 2023. What are they?
So the two biggest ones that we're pushing are the Minor Party Protection Act, which is going to move our total required registered voters to make a fully registered party here in the state. Going to bring it from 10,000 down to 5,000. So that'll make it so that we can have a lot more parties here in the state. And it makes it a lot easier to get that initial party status, because when you need 10,000 people in 2 years, it's very, very difficult to do. They don't make it easy on you. So that's something we're trying to do. And then the other one is to make cannabis a right to food under our new constitutional amendment, our new right to food amendment. So that's one that we're pushing. We also are really, really heavy on the Defend the Guard bill, which we didn't write. Eric Brakey already had one that he'd submitted from last session that he just resubmitted again. And then we have a couple of security bills that have been kind of morphed into something unrecognizable. So not going to take too much credit on those, but those are really the main bills that we're working on right now.
Hell yeah. Tell me more about the right to cannabis, because that sounds kind of statist, but also really awesome, because, cheers.
So here in the state of Maine, we have what's known as a constitutional right to food, which says that you're allowed to grow food on your property without a permit for personal consumption, right? And so cannabis was excluded from that. And so the goal of this bill is to include cannabis into the right to food, because it has been used historically as a flour-like substance that you would use wheat for or whatnot. You can use it the same. And the difference is if you don't do what's called decarboxylating and heat it up and activate the THC, then it acts a lot like your average flour might. So that's something that's been used historically as food, and other parts of the plant have also been used as food. And so this bill just seeks to include that into the right to food that is now a constitutional amendment.
I like that angle of the right to food, because it's not statist at all.
Right.
It's
it almost sounds like, the way it sounds is like you have a right for the government to feed you. or to
Right.
steal
That's what a
food
New
if you
York
claim you don't
constitutional
have
right to
enough
food
money.
would be.
No, here it's like you have the right to grow the food. You have the right to get your food, to own food. You own your land, you can grow your food. You can also forage for food. Unfortunately, we still have hunting licenses and permits, and we don't have Sunday hunting here. So there's still a lot of stuff to do on that front where, yeah, you're not allowed to hunt on Sundays in the state of Maine. We have a lot of these things called blue laws where it's just certain things you're not allowed to do on Sundays. You're not allowed to sell cars on Sunday. That's every car dealer's favorite day of the week is a Sunday because they're not allowed to go to work. They cannot get called in. Back when I sold cars, I prayed for Sundays because I knew I would at least have one day a week off. And then you can't hunt, even if it's your own property. And you have it posted as private property. You're not allowed to hunt.
That's weird. I guess
Very.
I'm not super surprised. I guess I'm surprised that it's Maine. If somebody from like Nebraska or like Kansas was like, "Oh yeah, we have these laws," I'd be like, "Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense." I just wouldn't expect it from Maine still.
And it's one of those things where you talk to a lot of people, and people who own land, they're like, "Well, I don't want people hunting on my land on Sundays." And it's like, well, yeah, I don't want people hunting on your land if you don't want them hunting on your land. Like, we're talking about private property ownership and the right to do with your property what you want with it. So if I'm on private property and I own said property, or my friend owns said property and has given me permission to hunt here, why does the state care what day it is? But their argument is that they wanted to make sure that people had a day where they were able to walk out in the public woods or do public things out in nature without being shot at, right? Which I can't understand if you say, hey, on these parcels of public land where hunting is usually allowed, this one day it's not for other activities, right? Mm-hmm. But to say on private land that you're not allowed to do these activities because people want to use the woods, that's a violation of property rights.
I'm gonna have to play devil's advocate on this one real quick, just because my personal experience is very like relevant to it. Because where I grew up, we own about like 1.1 acres of land, and then there's about 150 acres of land that like it does a big U around us and takes up like the entire road side on either side for about a quarter of a mile, and then like goes back a half a mile to a river. And it's privately owned, but it's like public property. It's actually like a kind of dope, like libertarian-esque model of how that could work. But that's a tangent I'm not going to get into. But, you know, we only own, you know, yay much of our backyard. And, you know, I grew up shooting and, you know, bows and arrows and everything else. And I've definitely shot into where people are walking. Accidentally on more than one occasion, and like, let me rephrase that. I've never like actually shot at people. Like there've never been people there. Let me rephrase that real quick. But I've shot at and like hit trees past where people could have been, and so I can kind of understand. So as not to be confused or anything else, just like a whole like ban on guns going off just in general, just like no shooting at things on this day, so that, you know, we can just be sure, like everybody's sure that you're good.
Well, and that's kind of the funny thing is there's no hunting, but you're totally allowed to go out and shoot. So like I could go to the same plot of land that you're not allowed to hunt on a Sunday, and I could go target practice. I could lay down 1,000 rounds.
That's
right.
Never mind.
That's my point, though. Is it's not consistent with itself. You know, if they said we're going to have this one day where everybody can go out, you can have one safe day in the woods, I would understand, and I'd say, okay, I don't necessarily agree with it, but at least it's logically consistent within itself. But I can go to the same public land and just shoot my pistol or shoot my same hunting rifle but not go hunting.
Yeah.
You see?
Bullets a lot
So
more
it
likely
just
to go
doesn't
through a
make sense.
target than an animal.
Correct.
Like, so
Right.
you're genuinely less safe target practice than shooting at an animal.
Right. And it's like here, you know, I would say if you were shooting in what is your backyard into some kind of, you know, private land that had been given basically given a public easement, if you're shooting in there and you start shooting close to people, well, that's now you're aggressing. You know what I mean? You're doing something wrong. But I think a lot of it too just kind of comes down to, is the property posted? What is, you know, maybe you shoot or hunt or whatever. There are some places where you go out to where you're just kind of taking your own safety into your hands by being there. And you should understand, like, if you're going out in the woods where people tend to shoot, where are they shooting? Which way do they orient themselves when they're shooting? And how do you be safe out there? But at the end of the day, it's on the person using the gun to make sure that people are safe and that their backdrop is safe, etc.
Yeah. I remember as a kid finding the like tree stand in the woods behind my grandma's house, and like it was like a big cornfield that was kind of like surrounded by woods, right behind her house, and that was pretty much, you know, area that like what you're describing, where you're just kind of taking your safety into your own hands. I didn't know that as like a 7-year-old. I'm just la-di-da-da fighting the monsters, whatever.
Right.
And happen upon a tree stand, barely even really know what it is, because my dad doesn't really hunt, but like the rest of the family does. And so I was like, oh cool, there's like a little tree house here, that's neat. And I like filed that in the back of my head, and then like maybe 6 months later, you know, fighting the monsters again, and there's somebody up there, and I'm like, oh hey, that must be their treehouse. That's neat. And then I'm like, la-di-da-da back towards my grandma's house, and I hear a gun go off, and I'm like, fuck. Like,
yep.
You know, turkey season, and they were, you know, maybe 100 yards. You know, he wasn't shooting anywhere as close to at me. Like, he was fully turned in the other direction. Like, a very safe shot. He was good. But, like, me as a kid was like, I'm gonna die.
Right. And I think that's something that when you're on property that you're maybe familiar with, but when you're a kid, you just don't know. You know, that's the hard thing. You just don't know.
For the record, I was not allowed to go onto that cornfield or past like the tree line. Like I was doing something wrong. Like my parents and grandparents had told me many times, don't go there.
We've all done those things as kids.
Oh yeah.
You know. But I think that when we look at the systems of laws that we have, right, ones that are completely inconsistent with themselves, like the Sunday hunting one, right? Because the things they would never ever, and I don't know how they've still gotten away with keeping hunting illegal on Sundays, but they could never ban shooting on Sundays. They just couldn't do it. It would never happen. It would never be able to be enforced. The only way that they can enforce the hunting on Sundays is because of tags. And people who are hunters generally are really responsible about tagging their deer. And so people would know if you were Sunday hunting. But, and two, I think that a lot of times we here in Maine, right, we do this thing where we respect the law because it's the law, but we say that's really stupid and they're lucky I'm going to follow it for now. And then it kind of just builds and builds and builds, and then it gets overturned. Like we were one of the first states to have gay marriage. We were one of the first states to have legal cannabis. One of the first states to have completely constitutional carry, where you don't need a permit for anything under a 50 cal, and you can open carry or conceal carry it. You know, so we have some really decent laws here. And it's because people got annoyed enough and they just said, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. You don't get to tell us that anymore. And that's kind of what we're we're trying to play on. We're trying to find those issues where people are just fed up, you know. And one of the biggest issues I think people are really fed up with these days, not just here, but all across the country, is just the mass overreach into our financial lives, you know, the inflation, the taxes that are going on, and the way the government thinks they can just spy on your Cash App or your Venmo or whatever, and, you know, tell you that you have to start filing taxes on someone giving you a birthday present.
Fuck that.
Like, it's the most ridiculous thing, and people are fed up with it. So, you know, I think to sum that up, because I went on a little tangent and then I lost myself. Yeah, man, it's when we have these laws that are just inconsistent and they need to be challenged, you know.
You guys should sponsor a bill to ban shooting on Sundays. Like you said, something that would never, ever, ever pass. To get it on the ballot at the same time so that you could, like, tie them together and get everybody fired up about the one, because fuck no, they're not going to ban shooting on Sundays. And, like, hey, well, we're at it. Let's unban hunting.
It could work. I would be nervous to be the one to do it, though, because if I was wrong, I've done a very horrible thing.
Fair. There's got to be a Democrat dumb enough to sponsor that.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean,
I'll let them
put out
figure
some
it out on their own.
Well, before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to tell us how to get involved with LP Maine. You know, you've said it a bunch of times, but give us one more pitch.
So we have a whole bunch of stuff going on. If you want to do audio or video editing, we need your skills. If you are a meme maker, we need your skills. If you're a social media pro, an event organizer, a door knocker, we need your skills, right? Yes, we need everybody of all skill sets and all backgrounds, but we specifically, where we're at right now in growth and trying to get to the next level, we need some meme makers, audio people that can help us make the ads. We need people to help us put together massive events that we can promote the ever-living crap out of, so that we can get 100 people in a room and get them fired up about liberty. We need to start getting people out to doing events, right? We have this massive event that we're doing on 4/22, April. That's April, just so everybody knows. April 22nd, we're doing a day of service. So in each one of our regions across the state, we'll be doing a fundraiser or a charity event for something. Maybe it'll be a park cleanup. Maybe it'll be doing something for a homeless charity or a soup kitchen or a food bank or something like that. So reach out to us at info@lpme.org. We'll give you some more info on what's going to be going on in your area, and we'll have more info coming out as it gets closer. We have convention coming up. That's going to be June 10th in Hollowell at the Maple Hill Farms Bed and Breakfast and Convention Center. It's a massive, gorgeous room. Actually, Tulsi Gabbard performed there when she came up to Maine a few years ago. So, you know, we'll be standing in the halls of greatness.
I remember that.
Look at you, David. Do you now?
I was there, I believe.
I know. I thought you would have been.
Yeah. I was at half of her Maine. I was there for one of her tours in Maine. She did like 2, I think. Possibly 3.
Well, maybe you can come up for this event and you can stream it live. But we also need folks that are able to just write some pieces. We need event coordinators. We need a lot of stuff, like I said. But and then one of the main events that we have going on right now is we do the protests every 4th Saturday of the month from 11 to 1. They're all at the same place, right at the Capitol building, right on the corner of the Blaine House. So if you're in the area, you know where that's at. Come on out, and we need to start building some of these places that we haven't been in a while. So if you're in an area and you're like, man, the Libertarians just haven't been active here, well, guess what? you can be the one to break that bad cycle. You know, you can be the one to help us get out of this rhythm of failure that we've been in your area, start building it up, and start getting people excited about liberty again. Because without you coming forward and saying, hey, I want to take on this minute role, you don't have to take on the responsibility of being a county chair. You don't have to be the face of anything. Just be someone that we can help direct people to organize tiny events. No matter what your skill set is, we have something for you to do. And if your skill set is that you've got money and you want to help us out that way, go to lpme.org/contribute. You can donate up to $5,000 right now. Every $8 that you donate gets us one registered voter. And, right now we're also trying to pay for a couple other little things. We've got events that we've got to put on. We've got candidates we're starting to get ready for. So please make sure you help us out with the money. And just email info@lpme.org too, if you want to get involved or learn more about what we've got going on.
Hell yeah. Only you can prevent statism in your area. So get involved. We've got the links below. Go check them out. And while you're at it, go like, subscribe, do all the things. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back here tomorrow night with Amanda Kingsley from The Confident Broker. We'll be taking a step out of the Liberty movement just a little bit and talking about finance and how we get around some of the government regulation and finance by doing some awesome stuff and helping businesses grow and succeed. And then next week, come back, Tommy Smart, local comedian from Brooklyn. We're going to talk about how we can break the culture war through comedy and promote liberty messaging through laughs. And it's going to be a good time. Come on back for that. Harrison, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was awesome.
Thank you for having me again, David. And anytime you need to fill an hour, let me know.
I will do that. Thanks again, guys. We'll catch you back here tomorrow night. Until then, keep up the fight.